Okay, so today I want to talk about another lesson I learned from Donald Trump's presidency, and this thing has to do with competition. So to go back into my own life, say college years, I went to college during the Vietnam era, and a lot of people seem to be dying simply because they got caught between superpowers. And sort of my response is to sort of look at ways we could end war and conflict, have world peace, I would say. That was, my guiding concept. And I was only one of millions that felt that way. So while I was in college, I studied conflict and looked at ways of resolving them. I also, between college and graduate school, I took a National Training Laboratories training course, and it's just basically a circle of like 12 people sitting there talking, keeping the conversations in the here and now, and some very positive feelings and great insights occurred during the course of that. I think it was a 2-week course. I felt, it really seems possible for people to communicate with each other and care about each other. And so, I felt like world peace was achievable. Though you ask why it hasn't already been achieved, I guess that was kind of a stumbling block for me at first. I didn't, in graduate school, I didn't learn much to sway me in another direction, though I think that was about that time, but maybe during college, I was introduced to the report from Iron Mountain, which, as I recall it, argued for the necessity or maybe even desirability of war. But it didn't connect with anything else that I had studied, so I just put it aside as an anomaly. I also thought about the United States and the whole model where you have this one country but lots of states, and that seemed really an appealing combination for me. If there was no jobs in your area, you can move to another area. If the taxes were too high where you were, you could move to someplace with lower taxes. You can pick your weather. You can't always get the combination you want, but you had lots of choices. People could move from one state to another and sort of match their environment to what they wanted out of life to a great extent. And so I thought, well, gee, that would be a nice model for the whole world. I mean, instead of the states of the United States, you would have the nations of the world, and they would form sort of there would be sort of a federal United Nations, or federations, as Star Trek would put it. All these countries there would be a global government, but there would be all these countries and open borders, and you don't like this country, you move to another country, and just sound like a good approach to world peace would be to simply take the United States and just use that as the model for the world. When Donald Trump started talking about America first, that was certainly taking us in a different direction. But I thought he had been making some good points that I think a lot of people in the United States, maybe not exactly along the lines that I had been thinking, had been thinking of in terms of globalism, and of course that term has come up quite a bit during Trump's presidency, and from his point of view that was a negative. And I could sort of see the point that what had happened in trade was America saw value in this new global world order sort of built around a model somewhat like based on the United States. And so when we negotiated with other countries who could care less about this somewhat ideological goal, they would bargain just for their own interest, either personal interest or their country's interest, and whoever was negotiating on the part of the United States would be able to give up some of the selfish or nationalistic goals of the United States in order to promote this vision of a global government and world order. So, in fact, what was going on is the United States was essentially on the losing end of a lot of negotiations, and we were the country that was most willing to sacrifice our own interest for the world's greater good, and that was a costly sacrifice that we could afford when we were clearly richer than any other country in the world. But as things got closer and closer, and the people we're dealing with didn't share our ideals, and in fact were contrary to them, they were just doing business with us. And so we were sort of eroding away our position in the world for the sake of an ideology that didn't seem like it was going to work, that in the end we would just simply lose our position, and people who had very different objectives and a very different vision of the way the world would go would be gaining and maybe surpassing us. And I thought that was a bad outcome. I was also influenced, I think, mainly by Jordan Peterson, who would talk about how some of these, I don't want to put, I might be mischaracterizing him, but the basic thing that I learned from him was that certain aspects of socialism or communism were sort of inevitable. It wasn't that that the idea of taking care of everybody and equality weren't really tried, or they're mismanaged, or people just happened to corrupt the system. Jordan Peterson, based on his readings of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce that right, said it was inevitable that when you went towards a socialist or communist agenda, even if the people who started that were true believers, that eventually they would be stabbed in the back by others who would just say they were, and who would then take over. And they were just basically interested in power, not really helping other people. They didn't mind wiping out huge segments of the population to secure their power, and not only when they're threatened, but they're just always mainly interested in themselves, but giving lip service to some altruistic goals to keep subjects more or less on their side. So then the question came, well, what kind of world order would we have if we're not going to have this globalist one? And Trump was advocating an America First agenda for America. He would also explain that other countries should be their country first. And I think that he sort of envisioned the world whether he articulates it or not, like a sports league. And, if I'm, from Chicago, I can be for the White Sox or the Cubs or the Bulls, or the Bears. And, I can be, a fan of those enterprises, and we can sort of battle things out, and that's sort of, I think, the way Trump sees the ideal world, not just, where I thought, well, gee, we get rid of conflict. Trump is saying, no, conflict is what we need. And that's how we become excellent. That's how we become exceptional, as we compete and we win. And so that's what we should be striving for, and so should everyone else. I know a lot of people were talking about him as an isolationist, but he's clearly not an isolationist. Otherwise, why is he working for Mideast peace? I guess it makes sense that he would be trying to denuclearize North Korea, but in general, he's very engaged on the world stage. But in every transaction, he's considering the welfare of the United States and not making that trade-off between some sort of ideological global future, but always making sure that America's own interests are taken care of in every negotiation. And so I think that's one of the reasons that our economy seemed to do well while Trump was managing it according to his inclinations. So I now think world peace isn't so much. I think we're not just looking for some sort of global kumbaya, I guess, which is probably what I originally had in mind. But more something where there's this dynamic competition. And so the biggest problem left then is, success breeds more success. And so in competition, once you start winning, there's sort of no stopping you from becoming dominant, and we move to globalism that way. And I think I think it's always going to be kind of precarious. But I think once you have a single government covering the whole world, then you lose your freedom. They say, okay, you don't, they can oppress you all you want. You have no choice. There's nowhere to run to. And I think we always want to have that. So I don't think we want one globalist government, but we do want nations interacting just from the standpoint, if one country gets too powerful or out of line, there are enough other countries that collectively they can sort of balance that off. And when we lose that, we may end up with a global government and a loss of freedom. So we should strive to keep a system in which everybody is doing their best for their own group or country. And that doesn't mean not caring about anybody else, but having your priorities clear. So that change of thinking I have to credit Donald Trump to some extent for. So, okay, that's it for today. Thank you. Bye.